The ballroom froze as Isabella whispered to the tall, dark stranger at her side, "Can you act like my husband, just for today?" The next morning's headline would ignite a scandal that could ruin them both. Isabella Monroe stood in the gilded foyer of her grandmother's Beacon Hill mansion, the chandelier above her scattering fractured light across marble floors. At 29, she had everything that Boston's old money promised: a face that graced the society pages, the curves of a woman bred for admiration, and the impeccable polish of a family that measured worth by reputation. Her silk dress clung to her thick, sensual frame, a careful choice that would never be considered too much by society's sharp eyes. On her wrist glimmered a Cartier watch, ticking far too loudly against her pounding pulse. Her hands trembled around the ivory envelope she had received that morning. Inside was the invitation that turned her stomach. "Bradley Morrison and Rebecca Patterson invite you to celebrate their engagement. Tomorrow night at the exclusive Harbour Club." Her ex-fiancé, the man she'd loved for 3 years, parading his new bride-to-be in front of every whispering mouth in Boston society. "Miss Isabella, your grandmother is expecting you in the solarium," Mrs. Kenton, the housekeeper of 40 years, said softly. Isabella smoothed her golden hair and walked into the sunlit room. There sat Eleanor Monroe, matriarch of the family and queen of Boston's rigid hierarchy. At 78, her posture was ramrod straight, her pearl necklace gleaming like armor. White orchids sat in a crystal vase beside her, precisely arranged, just like every detail of Eleanor's life. "You look pale," Eleanor observed without sympathy. "Understandable, I suppose. Tomorrow's spectacle would drain anyone." "I'll be fine, grandmother," Isabella replied, though her voice wavered. "Fine is not enough. Tomorrow evening will define how society views the Monroes for years. Bradley's engagement isn't simply a celebration. It is a declaration that he found someone more suitable than my granddaughter. The Pattersons have already whispered about our family's liberal leanings. This is their chance to humiliate us." The words struck Isabella like slaps. Bradley had ended their engagement 6 months ago, citing her lack of traditional commitment. Translation: she didn't bend easily enough to his expectations. It had gutted her pride, but she had pretended otherwise, holding her chin high while rumors swirled. Isabella's phone buzzed. A message from her oldest friend lit the screen. "Girl, you cannot show up to Bradley's party alone tomorrow. Call me Madison." Her chest tightened. She needed air. She needed something. Grabbing her keys, she fled the mansion, the pearls and orchids prison that smothered her. 20 minutes later, her sleek white BMW was parked on a crowded North End street, so out of place among brick buildings and hanging laundry that it looked like a foreign object. She wandered past Italian bakeries and small restaurants until voices drew her toward a community centre. Through the window she saw him. He was tall, dark-skinned and devastatingly handsome, standing at the front of a classroom with a whiteboard full of numbers. His crisp shirt fit across broad shoulders, his movements easy yet commanding. A dozen adults sat listening, scribbling notes as he explained budgeting strategies with warmth and patience. His smile lit up the room, transforming serious financial talk into something alive, hopeful. Isabella froze, unable to look away. She had attended countless lectures, charity galas, business seminars, but she had never seen this kind of energy, this authenticity. He wasn't performing for applause. He was connecting. For a moment she imagined what it would feel like if a man looked at her like that, not assessing her breeding or calculating her worth on society's scale, but simply seeing her. Just her. The spell broke when he gathered his briefcase, shook hands with an elderly woman, and stepped into the street. Isabella's breath caught. She should leave. She should drive away. Instead, she found herself standing directly in his path. "Excuse me," she blurted. He paused, studying her with curious dark eyes. "Yes?" Up close he was even more striking, tall, athletic, carrying himself with quiet confidence. His deep brown skin contrasted against the white collar of his shirt, his jaw sharp, his presence magnetic. "I'm Isabella Monroe." She forced the words out quickly, before she lost her nerve. "And I have an unusual request." His brows lifted. "Miss Monroe from the Monroe Foundation?" She swallowed. Of course he'd know her family's name. "Yes, but this isn't about the foundation. It's personal." He hesitated, clearly unsure. "I have 20 minutes before my next appointment. Coffee?" Minutes later, they sat across from each other in a modest cafe. Isabella's polished designer look screamed privilege against the chipped tables and paper cups, but she pushed through the embarrassment. "What I'm about to ask will sound insane," she admitted. He leaned back, folding his arms. "Try me. Tomorrow night, I need you to act like my husband." The words dropped between them like a bomb. His eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "Not real husband," she rushed. "Pretend, just for the evening. My ex-fiancée is throwing an engagement party, and I cannot show up alone. If I arrive with someone impressive, confident, successful, it shifts the narrative. It makes me look like I've moved on to something better." Silence stretched. He stared at her as if measuring whether she was serious or delusional. "I heard myself just now," Isabella said, flushing. "It sounds awful. A wealthy white woman asking a successful black man to play social theatre for her family. It's offensive, inappropriate." He cut her off, his voice even but firm. "Miss Monroe, are you asking me to make your ex jealous?" "Not jealous," she whispered. "Irrelevant." Her desperation bled through the cracks of her composure. She leaned forward, her blue eyes locking on his. "I saw you teaching. You're articulate, intelligent, accomplished. If you stood beside me tomorrow, no one would be talking about my heartbreak. They'd be wondering how I managed to upgrade." He sat back slowly, the corner of his mouth twitching with skeptical amusement. "And you think I fit that description?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady now. "More than anyone I've ever met." He studied her long enough for heat to rise in her cheeks. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why would I agree to this?" "Because I'll donate $50,000 to the community center's financial literacy program." His sharp intake of breath betrayed the weight of the offer. That money could transform his work, but his gaze remained cautious. "You're serious?" "Completely." One night. Formal wear, polite conversation, nothing beyond what appearances require. He drummed his fingers on the table, thinking, "And if people ask questions?" "You'll be yourself," she assured him. "Financial planner, community mentor. No lies, just the story that we've kept things private." His eyes held hers, dark, unflinching. "If I agree, I have conditions. The donation is made regardless of how the night goes. I won't pretend to be anyone but myself. And if anyone asks, we tell the truth, that we're simply two adults who found each other interesting." Relief washed through her. "That's perfect." He extended his hand. "Then, Miss Monroe, I accept your unusual proposal." Her pulse thundered as she slipped her smaller manicured hand into his strong one. The warmth of his grip sent a shiver racing up her spine. For the first time since Bradley had walked out of her life, Isabella Monroe felt a spark of power. Tomorrow night might be a disaster, or it might be the beginning of something she had never dared to imagine. But as she looked at the handsome stranger across the table, one thought echoed in her mind. What if pretending became something real? The tuxedo arrived in a black garment bag thick enough to feel like a promise. Malik lifted it from Isabella's foyer mirror and let the midnight fabric spill down his frame. Isabella's fingers trembled only once as she fixed his bow tie, her perfume a whisper of amber and citrus threading through the quiet. In the crystal light, she looked like a dare, emerald silk poured over her thick, curvy figure, a slit that suggested power more than provocation, diamonds like frost against warm skin. "You look—" She stopped, embarrassed by the softness in her voice. "Perfect. And you look like a problem," he said, half grinning, "the kind people write songs about." Her laugh broke the tension. It felt reckless to laugh tonight, but she needed it, needed anything that loosened the knot under her ribs. Outside, a town car idled. Inside, Isabella's grandmother waited with the cool gravity of a judge. Eleanor Monroe descended the staircase with the patience of a monarch. "Mr. Carter," she said, offering a hand, "we appreciate your presence." "Thank you for having me," Malik replied, steady. He did not lower his eyes. He did not shrink. He was himself, as promised. "Financial planning," Eleanor continued, as if considering a chess move. "Respectable, useful, and I'm told you volunteer." "Good. We prefer usefulness to spectacle." Isabella exhaled, surprised. That from Eleanor was as close to approval as anyone received. In the car, she laid out the rules like choreography. "The Harbour Club has eyes everywhere. Hand at my back when we walk. If someone is unkind, you don't defend me with heat. Do it with elegance. If you feel overwhelmed, touch my wrist and I'll redirect." "What about affection?" he asked. No smile, just a question. "Minimal. The point is composure, not hunger." He nodded. "And what about truth?" "Always," she said, surprising herself. "No claims we can't live with tomorrow." They rode in companionable silence over the bridge, Boston glittering, a city with two faces, both of which would be watching. The Harbour Club had been transformed into autumn. Amber lights, gold leaves, centerpieces bristling with money. A string quartet sang something old. Old families turned as they entered, the collective intake of breath more ritual than reaction. Isabella felt the moment falter, and then Malik's palm found the small of her back, warm, present, grounding. They moved as one across the room. "Isa!" Madison materialized first, eyes wide with delight rather than scandal. "And this must be—" "Malik Carter," he said, offering his hand. "Madison Reed," she returned, shaking it firmly. "God, you're tall. Thank you for making half this room check their posture." "Happy to be of service." Madison laughed. Her gaze flicked to Isabella, softened, and said without words, "You might survive this." Then she was swept away by someone in a navy suit who wanted a secret and a drink. Introductions rolled like surf. Board members, trustees, women who smiled with their teeth, men who said we should talk and meant prove you belong. Malik listened, answered, refused to posture. When asked about returns, he talked about risk. When asked about charity, he talked about accountability. When someone made the mistake of calling his volunteer teaching admirable dabbling, he said, "We don't dabble in the lives of people we claim to serve," and then asked the man where his firm banked its community responsibility funds. Isabella watched him and felt something inside her realign. For years she'd performed competence, fluent in etiquette and subtext. Malik did something quieter and more dangerous. He made competence look like character. A violin sang a high note. The crowd parted. The sensation hit her before the sight did, a change in air pressure, a tightening of voice. Then Bradley walked in with his fiancée on his arm and entitlement riding his shoulders like a tailored cloak. Isabella smiled as if her mouth had never learned anything else. "Bradley," she said when they met beneath a chandelier. "Isabella," he returned, gaze skating over her dress with clinical curiosity. "You look, well, thank you. You too. Rebecca, congratulations." The ring on Rebecca's finger threw daggers at the ceiling. "Thank you," Rebecca said, voice honey over ice. "We're thrilled you could come." Bradley's glance flicked to Malik. "And you are?" "Her husband," Isabella almost said, the word burning the edge of her tongue. She held it. This was not the moment to escalate for sport. "Malik Carter," she answered instead. "My partner. Business or pleasure?" Bradley asked, feigning innocence and failing. "Respect," Malik said, as if offering a card. "That's the category I aim for." A current of surprise skittered through the circle. Bradley's smile thinned. "And what is it you do, Mr. Carter?" "I help families and individuals build financial stability," Malik said, "and at night I teach people the tools to keep what they've earned." "How practical," Bradley murmured, the way a man might say how quaint. "Practical is how the lights stay on," Malik replied, tone easy, eyes steady. "Even here." Rebecca laughed, a bright, brittle sound. "How refreshing. Well, Isabella, it's lovely to see you thriving." Her gaze lingered on Malik as if he were an intriguing acquisition in someone else's catalogue. "Enjoy the evening." They moved on, trailed by perfume and a whispering weather front. Isabella realized her hands were fists. Malik's fingers brushed hers, brief as a bell. "Breathe," he said. She did. They made a slow circuit. Conversations shifted. Some people wanted to be near the heat. Others wanted proof that fire was dangerous. Eleanor approached, silent approval in the angle of her chin. "Mr. Carter," she said, glancing toward the dance floor, "do you waltz? I can count to 3. "Good. Take my granddaughter to the floor and shut their mouths without a word." He led Isabella into the lights. The quartet unfurled a Strauss piece, elegant and merciless. He found the beat, found her, placed his hand at her back, and they moved. It was not flawless. It didn't need to be. What mattered was the message written in their motion. "We are unhurried, unafraid, unconcerned with your audit." "Are you all right?" he asked, low. "I thought I would feel like I was drowning," she said. "I don't." "Why?" "Because you're not pretending to like me," she said before she could stop herself. "You're choosing to stand beside me." The corner of his mouth lifted. "For tonight, that was the deal." "And after tonight?" His eyes met hers. He didn't answer. The music answered for him, turning them, turning the room, turning the story she had told herself for years into something with edges and breath. When the song ended, a scatter of applause burst and died. Someone, somewhere, took a photo. The click landed in Isabella's chest like a pebble. She saw it then, the way a man near the bar lowered his phone, the way another slid toward him, the way whispers stitched a net under the chandelier. "Do you see that?" she murmured. "I do." "Should we care?" "Not yet." They drifted to the terrace for air. The harbour was a black mirror. The wind lifted the hair at the nape of her neck. Inside, the party glittered. Out here, the world felt truer. "You handled him," she said. "Bradley? The idea of him." Malik leaned on the railing. "Men like that are taught that practicality is vulgar. They forget that someone laced their shoes for them. She turned to him. In the muted light, his face was all planes and intention. Why did you say yes to me? He considered. Because $50,000 changes a lot of lives. Because you asked directly instead of commissioning someone to ask for you. Because you looked like a person who has never been told the whole truth and was starving for it. That's unkind. It's accurate. She didn't flinch. Will you dance with me again? As many times as the quartet can stand. They returned inside. The air had thickened, the way rooms do when appetite and cruelty start to braid. Strangers approached. A trustee wanted to talk about uplift. A woman asked if Malik found it challenging to teach those people. He answered without venom, only tools. Dismantle the premise, refuse the bait, replace the question. Isabella watched him and, for the first time in months, felt proud of someone in a way that wasn't performative. Then the photo surfaced. It floated first on a single phone, then another, then a third. Isabella laughing up at Malik, his hand on her waist, their bodies close enough to invent a caption. Madison appeared beside them, jaw tight. "Heads up," she said, voice like a metronome. "A blogger I know just got pinged with a tip. It smells like a setup." "From who?" Isabella asked, though she knew. "Pick a man with a fragile ego and a family who thinks the sun is a trust instrument," Madison said. "I'll stall if I can." Isabella felt the ground tilt. Not panic, clarity. This night had never been a secret. It had been a test. Of her, of him, of the story the city liked to tell itself about who belonged. Malik's hand found hers openly now. "We can leave," he said. No bravado. A simple exit offered like a chair to a tired guest. "We finished the night," she said. "We came to write an ending." They did. They danced again. They thanked the hosts. Eleanor kissed Isabella's cheek in front of everyone as if making a public bequest. "My allegiance has a spine." Bradley watched with a smile that didn't reach the part of him that kept score. In the car back to Beacon Hill, Isabella finally let her head drop to the cool glass. "It's going to be ugly," she said. "It might," Malik agreed. "But we gave them nothing to be ashamed of." She turned, studying him in the passing streetlights. The easy strength, the patience that wasn't passivity, the way he occupied his own life without apology. The line between performance and truth had grown so thin she could no longer tell where one ended. "Thank you," she said, and meant more than the night. "For not letting me drown. For not letting me turn you into a prop." "I'm not made of prop wood," he said, mouth quirking. "Too stubborn for that." At her door he hesitated, not out of uncertainty but respect. "You'll hear things tomorrow." He said, "Before you react, decide who you want to be when it's over." "Who do you think that is?" she asked. "The woman who asked for the truth," he said, and didn't run from the cost. He left her in the echo of that sentence. Upstairs, Isabella unpinned diamonds and peeled silk from skin gone electric. Her phone buzzed on the dresser like a trapped insect. Texts, emails, alerts. The first headline landed as she closed her eyes. Heiress and the mentor. Harbour Club's most unexpected couple. Isabella Monroe smiled into the dark, the kind of smile you can only wear when a storm names you. Tomorrow would be a reckoning. Tonight, she had learned the first step in surviving it. Choose the person you want to be, and then keep choosing, even while the room watches. And somewhere across the river, Malik Carter hung his tuxedo, washed his hands, and stared into his bathroom mirror as if it might answer the new question in his chest. If pretending feels this real, what happens when we stop pretending? The first headlines arrived before sunrise. Isabella Monroe awoke to a phone vibrating itself across the marble nightstand, its glow slicing through the dark. She had silenced her notifications the night before, but by dawn the flood had overwhelmed every filter. One glance at the screen and her stomach knotted. Boston heiress slumming it with community volunteer. Monroe princess trades pedigree for pretend husband. Isabella's rebound romance. Social suicide in silk. Photos filled the gossip sites, her laughing at Malik as they danced, his hand resting at her waist, their gazes too warm for a performance. The captions were worse. Gold digger, opportunist, desperate rich girl. It wasn't just society columns. The New York Post, the Washington Times, even 3 different finance blogs carried the story. Her phone buzzed again. Family meeting, 8 a.m. Dover Estate. Non-negotiable. By the time she arrived, the long oak dining table was covered in newspapers and printed blog posts. Her parents sat grim and composed, her sister Victoria pale with tension, and Eleanor at the head like a general preparing for war. "We have 6 hours before this spirals beyond our control," Eleanor announced. 2 options. Issue a statement declaring your relationship with Mr. Carter a misunderstanding, or double down and watch your social capital collapse. Option 2 is not survivable. Robert Monroe added flatly, his Wall Street Journal folded with surgical precision. Board positions will be withdrawn, invitations rescinded, business associates will distance themselves. You'll still have your trust fund, but you will no longer have a place in this city's structure. And Jonathan, her mother began, then corrected herself quickly. Mr. Carter will suffer as well. His professional reputation will be shredded. Do you want to be responsible for destroying him? Isabella pressed her palms against the cool table. Destroying him, or exposing the smallness of this world? Her father's jaw tightened. This is not philosophy, Isabella. This is survival. Victoria leaned forward. Issy, I'm not against him. I saw how he looked at you last night. But people will call him a social climber. They'll call you reckless. Can you endure that? Can he? For a moment, Isabella almost broke, almost agreed to the statement, to the safety, to the performance that had been her whole life. Then her phone buzzed in her lap. A text from Malik. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But don't let them convince you to be smaller than you are. She lifted her chin. I'm choosing option 2. I'm standing by him. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's eyes, sharp as glass, met hers. Once you choose this, there is no return. Then I don't want to return, Isabella said. By mid-morning, the phone calls shifted from family pressure to professional fallout. Malik sat in his office, staring at his muted cell. 3 clients had called already, voices cautious. We're concerned about your judgment, about perception, about propriety. He could taste the condescension behind the words. Why her? Why that world? Then the community centre's board chair rang. Malik, I need to ask if your relationship compromises the program. Donors might wonder if you're distracted, or if their money is subsidizing your new lifestyle. Malik kept his voice even. The program remains exactly what it has always been. The only thing different is your perception. We'll need to revisit this at the next board meeting, the chair said. When the call ended, Malik braced his hands on the desk. For years he had fought to prove that integrity outweighed stereotype, that his work was rooted in community, not ambition. And now, in one night, they were ready to reduce him to a cliché, an ambitious black man using a rich white woman to climb. He closed his eyes, fighting bitterness. Then his phone buzzed again. Isabella. Malik, I'm so sorry, she blurted when he answered. This is my fault. I dragged you into this circus. You didn't drag me, he said calmly. I walked. But your clients, your board, they'll test me. They'll test us. That's what fear does. I should protect you. I should tell them it's over. Silence. Then, is that what you want, Isabella? For it to be over? Her throat closed. No. Then don't hide, he said. Don't apologize for something real. If we run, we teach them they were right. If we stand, we show them who we are. She pressed the phone to her ear, tears sliding hot down her cheeks. His voice steadied her in ways her family's money never had. Together, he said simply. By afternoon, the attack sharpened. Bradley's family was suspected, though no one could prove it. Bloggers quoted anonymous friends who painted Malik as a predator and Isabella as a spoiled rebel. At the Dover estate, Isabella's parents crafted a draft statement of apology. At the community centre, Malik doubled down on his work, standing in front of a class of young mothers, explaining debt consolidation as if the world weren't trying to humiliate him. But the storm pressed closer. At twilight, Isabella arrived at the centre. She found Malik still in his shirt sleeves, chalk dust on his fingers. Children ran past her with crayons. A grandmother called thanks in Spanish. Life was moving here, stubborn against scandal. Why do you look like you've been through battle? He asked gently. Because I have, she said. She told him everything, the threats, the headlines, the family ultimatum. He listened without flinching. And what did you say? He asked. That I choose you. His face softened. For the first time that day, the iron in his posture melted. Then we'll face whatever comes. The next morning, the Globe's editorial board invited them in. Patricia Sullivan, a sharp-eyed editor, leaned forward across the mahogany table. You're the story now. Would you like to tell it in your own words? Isabella's hands trembled, but Malik's steady presence beside her lent strength. We refuse to be ashamed of caring about each other, she said. The narrative being pushed, that I'm slumming and he's social climbing, is a lie. We met because we share values, because he showed me a kind of authenticity I didn't know I was missing. And what about you, Mr. Carter? The editor asked. My work speaks for itself, Malik said. I was building financial stability for families long before I met Isabella, and I'll continue long after. But what I've discovered is that love and respect don't come with pedigrees. They come with character. The room was quiet when they finished. The story would run the next day under the headline, Across the Line, a Boston Love Story. That night, Isabella lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her Beacon Hill apartment. The storm had not passed. In truth, it had only begun. Friends would vanish. Boards would distance themselves. Her family's name would be whispered with pity and scorn. But she remembered Malik's words. Decide who you want to be when it's over. Her pulse slowed. Her decision was already made. She whispered into the empty room as if to summon him beside her. Can you act like my husband, just for today? But the truth pulsed back through the silence. He already had, and she already wanted it to be real. The Dover estate had always intimidated Isabella. Its long colonnades and marble floors whispered of control, tradition, and power passed down like currency. As a child, she had run through these halls believing her family's influence was eternal. Tonight, those same walls felt like a tribunal chamber. Her grandmother Eleanor sat at the head of the dining room table, pearls glinting like armor, posture unyielding. Her father leafed through reports with the precision of a surgeon. Her mother smoothed lace napkins as if order on the table might restore order to their lives. Victorian cousin Margaret sat further down, tense and watchful. Sit, Isabella, Eleanor commanded, voice like iron cloaked in velvet. She obeyed, though her stomach twisted. In front of them lay a spread of newspapers, gossip clippings, and iPad screens glowing with vitriol. Headlines screamed social rebellion or social ruin. Photos from the Harbour Club, her and Malik dancing, her hand on his chest, his arm circling her waist, had been blown up as evidence. We cannot allow this to continue, her father began. Every board, every charity, every donor is calling. Your relationship is a liability. Our name cannot sustain this level of ridicule. This is about optics, her mother added gently, though her eyes were cold. Jonathan. Malik, Isabella corrected sharply. Malik may be educated, successful in his way, but society will not see him as an equal match. You know this. We raised you to understand compatibility. And what if compatibility is a prison? Isabella shot back. Don't be dramatic, Eleanor snapped. This is about survival. We have two paths. Option 1, issue a statement declaring this was a brief lapse, a misunderstanding. You regret the confusion and will move forward appropriately. And option 2, Isabella asked, though she already knew. Option 2 is exile, her father said bluntly. Board positions withdrawn, invitations rescinded, business connections dissolved. You will keep your trust fund, but your social capital, everything that has given you advantage, will vanish. The words echoed like a gavel. Victoria leaned forward, her tone softer. Issy, I don't hate him, but do you realize what you're asking of him? People will call him a social climber forever. Can he survive that? Can you? For a heartbeat, Isabella almost gave in. She could see the easy path. An apology drafted by her mother 6 months abroad, return when the gossip cycle shifted. Malik could go back to his life, she to hers. Comfortable, predictable, safe. Then her phone buzzed in her lap. A text from Malik. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But don't let them convince you to be smaller than you are. The words lit something inside her, like oxygen meeting flame. She rose from the chair, surprising even herself. I'm choosing option 2. I'm standing by him. The silence that fell was suffocating. Her father's face hardened. You're throwing away 30 years of cultivated reputation for what? For a man you've known a week? For a man who sees me, she said fiercely. Not the Whitmore name, not the pearls. Me. Her mother's lips pressed into a line. Feelings don't sustain marriages. Appearances do. Children raised across cultural divides face scrutiny you cannot imagine. Do you want that for them? Isabella's voice shook but didn't break. I want them to grow up watching their mother choose authenticity over performance, love over fear. Eleanor rose then, her presence towering though she was small. If you do this, Isabella, bridges will burn that can never be rebuilt. You will not be welcomed back when you tire of this experiment. Then I'll build new bridges, Isabella said, though her knees trembled. Margaret's gaze softened unexpectedly. It's risky, cousin, but for what it's worth, I've never seen you look alive the way you did with him. Eleanor's pearls caught the light as she turned away, verdict delivered without words. So be it. You've chosen your exile. Isabella left the estate with her pulse roaring in her ears, both terrified and liberated. Later that night, she met Malik at his modest apartment in the North End. He had opened the door before she could knock twice. "How bad was it?" he asked. "Bad enough to make exile sound like freedom," she answered. He smiled, a small, quiet thing that undid her more than tears. "They gave me two choices," she continued. "Abandon you or abandon everything I was raised to want. I chose you." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached out, brushed his thumb against her cheek, and whispered, "That's the bravest thing anyone has ever done for me." Tears stung her eyes. "I don't feel brave. I feel like I just set fire to my life." "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes you have to burn the script to write your own story." They stood there, the city outside roaring with indifference, and for the first time Isabella understood what courage tasted like. It was salt and fear and sweetness all at once. The next morning, their story hit the Boston Globe. The interview they'd given, raw and unvarnished, ran under the headline, "Across the Line, a Boston Love Story." Isabella read it with trembling hands. Open quote. "We refuse to be ashamed of caring about each other," Isabella Monroe said. "Our backgrounds are different, yes, but love isn't about pedigree. It's about respect." Malik Carter added, "My work existed long before Isabella and will continue after. What I've discovered is that real connection doesn't ask for permission. It asks for courage." Close quote. The article went viral. Some called them brave, others called them foolish. Supporters from outside Boston society flooded their inboxes with messages of solidarity. The city's elite recoiled. By noon, 3 charity boards had dropped Isabella. 2 of Malik's clients walked away, but the community center doubled its donations, and strangers who had never spoken to Isabella before approached her on the street to whisper, "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." She had never felt more stripped bare or more alive. That night, she sat with Malik on the steps of the community center, city lights flickering around them. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "Neither do I," he said, "but I know what doesn't come next. Pretending." She looked at him then, really looked, the man who had entered her life as a hired shield and now stood as the anchor to her storm. "Malik," she whispered, "if this is exile, I'd rather live it with you than safety without you." He didn't answer with words. He simply took her hand, and in the quiet of the North End, Isabella realized she had chosen not just him, but herself. 1 year later, Isabella Monroe stood before the cracked mirror of the North End Community Church, her hands trembling not from nerves, but from awe. The ivory gown she wore was simple, no jeweled bodice, no 10-foot train. It skimmed her curves with elegant ease, chosen not from the racks of Parisian designers, but from a modest boutique near Cambridge. It was the kind of dress a woman bought with her own money, not her family's account. Around her throat rested her grandmother's pearls, a gift reluctantly given months earlier, and now worn as a bridge between past and present. "Stop fussing," Madison laughed, brushing down the fabric and fixing the veil with practiced fingers. As maid of honor, she was radiant in sapphire silk, her energy a perfect counterpoint to Isabella's trembling calm. "You've already broken every rule your family raised you on. Don't go doubting yourself at the altar." Isabella caught her friend's gaze in the mirror. "Do I look like me?" she whispered. Madison's smile softened. "For the first time in your life, you do." The church bells tolled once. It was time. The sanctuary was filled with a curious mix of people, an audience that no one from Boston's elite would have predicted. Half the pews were occupied by Jonathan's community center families, grandmothers in floral dresses, children whispering excitedly, working parents who had cancelled shifts just to witness the occasion. The other half was scattered with Monroes and their allies, those who had chosen loyalty to family over loyalty to appearance. Some faces were stiff with disapproval, but others, surprisingly, radiated warmth. At the front of the aisle stood Malik Carter in a tailored black suit, tall and commanding, yet visibly softened when his eyes found Isabella. He had never looked more himself, not masked by performance, not diminished by expectation, but centered in quiet confidence. The music swelled. Eleanor Monroe, aged but unbroken, took Isabella's arm. "If my granddaughter is brave enough to choose love over convention," she declared loudly, "then I am brave enough to walk her down this aisle." Gasps rippled through the pews. Isabella squeezed her grandmother's arm, gratitude swelling in her chest. They walked together past the rows of watching eyes, and Isabella felt something she hadn't in years: freedom. The ceremony was officiated by Reverend James Thompson, director of the community center, and a man whose voice carried both authority and kindness. "Today," he began, "we witness not the union of pedigrees or the arrangement of reputations, but the joining of two souls who chose authenticity over safety. Isabella and Malik have taught us that when love is rooted in respect, differences do not divide, they enrich. Vows came next. Malik's hands were warm as he took hers. "Isabella," he said, his deep voice steady, "you walked into my world asking me to act." What neither of us knew was that one night of performance would reveal more truth than either of us had dared to live. You showed me that privilege doesn't have to mean distance, it can mean responsibility. You gave me a partner in building something bigger than both of us. I vow to keep building with you, for our family, for our community, for a life that matters. Her throat tightened as she began her own. "Malik, when I asked you to pretend to be my husband, I thought I was borrowing strength. What I discovered was a strength in myself I never knew I had. You made me see that love isn't about appearance or strategy, it's about courage and truth. You've given me both. I vow to keep choosing truth, even when it's terrifying, because with you the risk is always worth it." Reverend Thompson smiled. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss." Their kiss was not theatrical. It was not a show for cameras or whispers. It was soft, sure, and real. For the first time in her life, Isabella knew she was kissing the man who saw her, not the woman she had been raised to perform. The reception was held in the community centre gymnasium, decorated with strings of lights and photographs from their non-profits projects. Instead of crystal chandeliers, paper lanterns glowed above the tables. Instead of imported roses, vases overflowed with sunflowers donated by a local farm. Instead of a catering empire, food was provided by small neighborhood restaurants Malik and Isabella had supported through their foundation. It should have felt small. To Isabella, it felt infinite. Children from the after-school program sang a song they'd written. A retired teacher gave a toast about the couple's dedication. Madison, raising a glass, quipped, "I knew when she said just pretend for one night, that this woman was in trouble." Laughter rang out, and Isabella laughed too, no longer afraid of being the punchline. Later, Malik found her on the dance floor, his hand sliding easily around her waist. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "What, giving up the country clubs, the board seats, the glossy dinners?" She teased. "Yes," he said seriously. She looked around at the room, her grandmother laughing with a single mother she'd met during volunteer work, Victoria speaking warmly with a young couple about cultural differences, her father reluctantly sipping punch while watching children run past. And then she looked at Malik, steady and unshaken, a man who had stood beside her when the world tried to shame them. "No," she whispered, "not for a second." As the evening drew down, the guests departed with hugs, blessings, and promises of continued support. Isabella and Malik remained behind in the quiet community centre, the lights dimmed but still glowing. "Ready to start our new adventure?" Malik asked, offering his arm. She slipped her hand into his, the pearls at her neck cool against her skin, the weight of her old world balanced now by the warmth of the new. "I've been ready since the night I stopped pretending to be someone else." They walked together out into the cool Boston night, the car waiting with flowers tied to the bumper. Behind them, the community centre still glowed, filled with evidence of lives touched and families strengthened through their shared work. Ahead of them stretched a lifetime, uncertain, risky, but theirs. The girl who once whispered desperately, "Can you act like my husband just for today?" had become the woman who could declare with unshaken certainty, "You are my husband for life." And in Malik's answering smile, Isabella saw not the end of a masquerade, but the beginning of everything real.